The White House Office of Intergovernmental Affairs has been in touch with state and local officials in the path of the storm to provide them guidance and support. As the storm continues to track the East Coast, heavy to intense snow, sleet, and strong winds could result in significant travel impacts and possible coastal flooding. Again, the President encourages everyone and local leaders and public safety officers and follow their warnings and closure notices. They are working around the clock to ensure the safety of our citizens and their families. In light of the storm, the schedule for today changed a bit. Obviously, German Chancellor Merkel's visit was moved to Friday. We'll continue to provide you updates on the schedule as we grow closer to Friday. Today, the President had lunch with the Deputy Crown Prince and Minister of Defense of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. This afternoon, the President will swear in Seema Verma as the Administrator of Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services. The President looks forward to having the spectacularly qualified and experienced Administrator Verma finally on board, especially as we continue to lay the groundwork for a historic reform of our healthcare system. Later this afternoon, the President and Secretary of Health and Human Services, Dr. Tom Price, will have a call with the CEO of Anthem Healthcare, Mr. Joseph Swedish. He will then have a phone call with Speaker Ryan and Majority Leader McCarthy to further discuss the Republican plan to repeal and replace Obamacare with the American Health Care Act and a series of much-needed regulatory reforms to accompany that. The President was glad to see the National Federation of Independent Businesses announce their support for the American Health Care Act. NFIB has previously identified health care along with small business taxes as their two biggest priorities, and the President's health care agenda will address many of their concerns for small businesses. Yesterday, of course, the Congressional Budget Office released their report on the American Health Care Act. I know that there have been significant concerns about the CBO report, and I want to give a little bit of context to the numbers that have been going around. In 2013, the CBO estimated that 24 million people would have coverage under Obamacare in 2016. They were way off. They were off by 13 million people, over 50%. In fact, only 10.4 million people are actually covered. Reports now suggest that that number has dwindled down to 9 million. CBO coverage estimates are consistently wrong and, more importantly, did not take into consideration the comprehensive nature of the three-pronged plan to repeal and replace Obamacare with the American Health Care Act. We're working to bring real relief and better choices to the American family. The two other prongs of our plan contain several additional reforms that will further drive down costs and increase coverage. When you get down to it, the Congressional Budget Office is there to measure the potential impact of programs on the federal budget. Its attempts to estimate coverage have been historically faulty. But in the portion of its analysis that focuses on what the office is really about, the CBO concedes that the American Health Care Act would actually reduce the deficit by over $330 billion and bring health insurance premiums down 10%, even before many of the significant reforms in prongs 2 and 3 have taken effect. And as I've mentioned before, some of these include expanding healthcare savings accounts, streamlining the process at FDA so that innovative and lower-cost medicines can get to patients faster, allowing health insurance to be sold across state lines, which increases competition and decreases costs, permitting small businesses to band together to negotiate healthcare rates for all of their employees, and reforming the medical malpractice system so that doctors aren't spending their time and patients' money on unnecessary procedures. Beyond the numbers, let's talk about some real-life examples of the cost of Obamacare for some actual Americans who the President heard from during his listening session yesterday. Kim Sertich, a small business owner in Arizona, had her health care costs skyrocket from $389.79 a month to $809.15. Carrie Cooey from Colorado, a mother of 6 whose youngest son is autistic, saw her family's yearly insurance go from $1,700 to $52,000 for a lower quality plan. And Joel Brown, a farmer from Tennessee, saw his catastrophic coverage costs spike in the wake of Obamacare from $119 a month to more than $500 per month. These are the stories that really matter to millions of Americans who are suffering under Obamacare. And these are the stories that are at the top of the President's mind as he works towards reforming our healthcare system. The President is committed to working together with Speaker Ryan, Majority Leader McCarthy, and Majority Leader McConnell to create a system that's affordable and accessible to all Americans. Let me walk through the rest of the schedule for the week. Tomorrow, the President's headed to Michigan to meet with auto executives and workers, and we'll discuss how his plans for rolling back federal red tape will lead to more American jobs and higher wages specifically in the automobile sector. It's a great opportunity for the president to showcase moves he's already made towards his ambitious Buy America, Hire America agenda, like encouraging investment in workforce training and development so that Americans are ready for the jobs of the future, and removing the roadblocks that prevent American businesses from staying and expanding here in the United States. The president hopes to build on the great optimism that he has built within the business community in anticipation of the renewed opportunities the president's economic agenda has already created. He and his team are hard at work to produce the results that the American people deserve and voted for last year. He will also travel to Nashville, Tennessee, where he will lay a wreath at President Andrew Jackson's tomb on his 250th birthday. Thursday, the Taoiseach of Ireland, Kenny, will come to the White House for the traditional St. Patrick's Day visit, including a reception in honor of the Taoiseach and Mrs. Kenny. And as I mentioned, German Chancellor Merkel's visit will resume on Friday, and we'll have an update on that schedule. With that, we're glad to take a few questions.
Sean, President Trump has said that under his plan there will be insurance for everybody. How do you square that with the CBO numbers, and is that a promise he can really keep?
Well, I think there's two issues that are important to note on that, Catherine. Number one, more and more Americans have no choices, so they don't have insurance. I've mentioned this before. Having a card and having coverage that when you walk into a doctor's office has a deductible of $15,000, $20,000 a year isn't coverage. That's a card. That doesn't get you the care you need. It doesn't allow you to get the procedure or the referral that you need from a doctor that's telling you what you need to have happen. That's vastly different than what we hope to exist, which is giving people who don't have it. And let's kind of, I think it's important to add some context to this. If you think about the individual market that exists right now, the individual insurance market, you've got roughly 30 million people that exist right now. 9 million people now are on the exchange. That number's gone down. 6.5 million people have said they don't want any insurance and they're going to pay a penalty. And then just under 14 million people have said that they have applied for a hardship. So you've got almost 20 million people in America who have said that they don't want Obamacare and they'll either pay a penalty or have applied for a hardship. Those are people who don't have it to begin with. The exchanges sought out to cover these people, and we're finding out that you've got 9 million plus who are getting it right now. They have no coverage. And for more and more Americans, they're losing their coverage, their choices are gone. Tax credits and competition that will come in phases 2 and 3 and the prongs that we talked about will further drop prices down, will further increase competition. The CBO score didn't take into consideration in that. And again, if you look at their numbers, you've got roughly just over 9 million people on the exchanges. The CBO number says that 14 million people in the first year alone will lose coverage. It doesn't take a ton of analysis to recognize that doesn't make any sense logically. You can't only have 9+ million people on the exchange and say in the first year alone when there's no touch to Medicaid or anything else, you're just removing the individual mandate that forced people to buy something that they didn't want in the first place, that is going to lead to 14 million people, that people are going to drop off Medicare, they're not going to take their employer. That doesn't add up. In fact, I would argue that if you look at the other part of the equation, the 20 million plus people who have either chosen to pay a penalty, you think about that, those 6.5 million people are saying either the plan is too costly, the plan doesn't provide coverage. I think a lot of those people, especially when we continue to instill additional coverage, they have more choices, they can pick a plan that actually fits their needs or fits their budget, you're going to see more people want coverage, who are going to choose coverage. So I think that the CBO number, they have a record that doesn't match up with the ability to count people. They're pretty good at dollars, not as good at people. And I think that when you look at the additional phases or prongs of this whole comprehensive approach, that actually changes the equation a lot. It's looking at one piece of a 3-part plan, and that's not the entirety of the plan that we're looking at. And that doesn't.
So what does the White House think the change will be next year then?
Well, I don't think that we don't do those projections, but I think that there's no question when you look at the cost, they're already saying just this alone, just doing the first prong of this will take costs down 10% in the individual market. And if you think about it, they're up 25% in the individual market on average already. this year alone, under just people who are on the exchanges, up 25%. The CBO is saying just with what we're doing on first prong alone, 10% decline in the individual market. That's a significant reduction. That's what we're talking about. Bringing costs down and increases choices. That's a big deal right now. The problem that you have currently is that these subsidies that people get them a card that doesn't get them care, and that's what we need to start focusing on, is how many people are actually getting the care they need to deal with the medical concerns of them or their family, and that's not what's happening. Mike.
Sean, stating, as you did, that the primary objection of this White House is that the CBO report doesn't take into account Phase 2 and Phase 3. Are there specifics, either in terms of the specific regulatory reforms that the White House is considering and the specific terms of the legislation that you would offer that are out there for people to study as part of this? Because as you surely know, Tom Cotton, among others, are skeptical of whether these phases can actually...
I don't... Look, the things that I mentioned earlier, allowing people to buy across state lines, to pool their insurance, to expand HSAs, to reform the FDA, all of those things, I think, unquestionably add competition and choice. There's no question about it. If one plan can sell that was in Maryland into Virginia where they can seek additional customers, that competition alone invariably brings down costs. And we've seen this in market after market, where once you allow competition, by itself, that will bring down costs. It'll bring in choice. Right now, these insurance companies who have been mandated by the government to create certain packages that people don't need. You've got young people that are being told to buy packages that have, end-of-life care that they don't necessarily need. You've got people who are in their older phases of life being, having to buy stuff for maternity that may not be a service that they need at their stage of life. But the problem is that the government got involved in healthcare and started dictating what needed to happen instead of allowing the choice and allow people to buy a plan that actually was tailored to the needs that they want. Those reforms in themselves unquestionably bring down costs. There's no question. But I think one of the issues that has to go back to overriding this issue, and the president has stated this on numerous occasions, if we do nothing, if we just allow this to continue, it will collapse on its own. The cost of it is unsustainable. The premiums are going sky high in state after state, and the choices keep going further and further down. And so this idea of comparing it to Obamacare is a false choice, because they have no choice. It is the choice is going away and the cost continues to get higher through every phase. And so to assume that the comparison is apples to apples is a false choice.
I'm not making that, but you've been critical from this podium of the Obama administration, of Democrats, and the way they went about passing the Affordable Care Act. In the interest of transparency that you accuse them of not following, of shoving it down people's throat,
well,
should the White House, should HHS put those details out now? Should they put the legislative details out?
I think the House is working on that in a lot of cases, and as that legislation gets... I think that's a great question for Speaker Ryan, and I know that he's been working with the team and getting it done, and I think the sooner that we can get all those prongs out there, the better. I agree with you. But I think the big difference, just so we're clear, is that we posted this bill online, the Speaker had it out there, the President tweeted it out. Anyone in the country and anyone in the world could read it. That's a vastly different approach than after it's being done, told after we pass it you can read it, which was what Speaker Pelosi said.
Encourage Republicans to put details.
I think sure. The more we can get out there in those phases, absolutely. And I know the Speaker is working with his members to do that, but I think that's an appropriate question for the Speaker to answer, not for me. I know that we are trying to work with them. I know that there's a lot of members that are working with Speaker Ryan and Leader McCarthy, and frankly on the other chamber as well. But I think that we continue, and that's why I think we're talking about all of those prongs and all the pieces of them, so that we can start making sure that people understand the comprehensive nature of this.
Before there's a vote on.
I think that's a question for Speaker Ryan to answer. I think the more that we get out there, the better. Though, Alexis.
Can I follow up on what Mike was asking about Senator Cotton? Why is the White House giving Senator Cotton full running room to go again and again in the media and to denigrate the House plan without bringing him in, discussing with him what Mike was just bringing up, alternatives that he's suggesting? Why does he have special dispensation to go out?
I don't think he has special dispensation. It's a free country. He can say what he wants. No, I think our team has been working with his team, as they are with Senator Paul's team and anyone else who has ideas. We've been engaged in a very, very robust discussion with members in both chambers who have ideas to move this thing forward. I don't think we we are able to tell people what they can and cannot engage in a free society with. I mean, Senator Cotton's obviously able to make any comments that he'd like. We'd obviously continue to like to work with him, and I think the team will continue to reach out to both he and his team to try to get his ideas on this. But
Well, the president spent time talking to him about his ideas on immigration. Has he called him? Has the vice president called Senator?
let me. I know that we've had a very robust discussion with members of the House and the Senate. I would have to get specific details of what we've done with specifically Senator Cotton.
Senator Cruz coming today?
I know that I believe I'd have to check on that. I know that there was a group of individuals. I don't have that list in front of me.
Senators?
I will get back to you on that, Alexis. I promise. The snowstorm kind of shifted a bunch of stuff up, so I don't want to start getting in front of who actually can be here and who can't. But I will make sure that we get those details out. And we have a. I'd be glad to get it to the entire pool.
Thank you.
Margaret.
Oh, thank you. So, still on the same subject, does the White House support the House bill as it is, or amending it? And there's been reporting that the White House is involved, or some White House officials are involved in shaping what's being described as like a major or significant manager's amendment in conjunction with conservatives. Can you?
I don't think it's. Yeah, I would. I'm sorry.
Yeah, well, no, we can go back and forth, but I'm just wondering, is the White House writing this amendment, or just considering backing the amendment? And does Paul Ryan know about it? We could tell him about it right now, I guess.
No, I think Speaker Ryan is well aware of the manager's amendment.
Okay.
I think, as we've noted multiple times from the podium, when people have ideas that are constructive or supportive, or ones that we have heard about from different members that we have engaged with, and frankly, ones that the House and the Senate has engaged with who shared ideas, we've always stated a willingness. Director Mulvaney's talked about the Secretary Price, the President himself, the Vice President. Part of the reason we're engaging with these individuals is to hear their ideas, to talk to them about not just the content, but the approach. What can go in, what can go out, how we deal with the different phases, as Mike was asking, and when we go. But all of that is part of a comprehensive strategy to engage with members who support us, who have ideas and want to be on board, who want to be constructive in the process, and achieve the President's goal of having a patient-centric healthcare system. So we are obviously in talks with House leadership about the contents of that. As I mentioned, the President will be on the phone with Speaker Ryan and Leader McCarthy later this afternoon to talk to them about some of these ideas and some of the path forward. But that's part of the legislative process.
So all this, I actually have a second question, but just to clarify this, so this involves, the White House is working to help shape that manager's amendment?
Yes.
Okay. And on the visit of the Deputy Saudi Crown Prince today,
Yeah.
Can you talk us through a little bit more detail? Does that involve the resumption of arms sales? Is that about oil? And
It literally was wrapping up as we were walking over here, so I want to make sure that I get a readout. We'll provide that to the pool, as we do with all of the leader visits. So I will have more details from that once they were concluding that visit as we were coming here, and so I'll make sure I get it. Blake?
Thanks, Sean. In the middle of all of this, there's also the debt ceiling.
Yeah.
How urgent of a priority is this, and how concerned is the administration in tackling this, given the letter that Secretary Mnuchin sent out last week? Joe Biden?
Yeah, so Secretary Mnuchin sent a letter noting that under the Budget Reconciliation Act, the Congress's debt authority had until March 15th. He notified them of that. We'll continue to work with Congress. As you know, we'll be releasing a budget later this week. That's part and parcel of our approach to fiscal responsibility, to making sure that we talk about the path forward, how we address both the ending of fiscal year 17, it goes until September 30th this year, and then the budget, which would be fiscal year 18. But how we address our budget deficits, our debt, and our spending going forward is something that is a holistic conversation that the Secretary and Dr. Mulvaney and others, and the President, the Vice President, are engaging with Congress on. But so this isn't our job under the law was to notify them of the authority that they passed and when it expired, and I think the Secretary will work with Congress on a path forward as far as our debt situation.
Secondly, let me get your reaction to Jonathan Gruber, one of the architects of Obamacare. He called essentially the plan that you put forward, if it's implemented, a quote scam. Your reaction to that would be what?
I think, I think that the plan that he helped create hasn't done so well for Americans seeking health insurance. Again, I don't have to go over the numbers, but just think about what he sought out to do. I mean, there was a pool of people that needed health care. They got about 9 million of them. You've got 14.4 plus or minus million of people who claimed a hardship exemption. So they have no insurance, that are not receiving Medicaid, that don't qualify for any other assistance, who can't afford Obamacare. And then you've got another 6 million plus that have chosen to pay the penalty. So I would argue